The year is 1523. The most powerful man in Europe receives a letter. Not a declaration of war, not a papal decree, a bill. Charles V ruled an empire where the sun never set. 81 titles. Commander of armies spanning 3 continents. God's chosen emperor. And yet, this letter made his hands shake. Listen to what it said. It is well known that your imperial majesty would not have acquired the crown without my help. Your majesty must know the sums of money I have expended. Therefore, I respectfully request that you pay what you owe me, without further delay. The sender? Not a king, not even a nobleman, a banker's son, from a family of peasant weavers. His name was Jacob Fugger. And this is how he bought Europe. Most historians will tell you Jacob Fugger got rich because of silver mines or lucky royal connections. They are wrong. While his rivals were obsessed with gold, Fugger realized the true currency of power was something else entirely: information. It started when he was just a young man sent to Venice. He didn't go there to party or admire the art. He went there to study, and he brought back a piece of technology that would change business forever. It wasn't a machine, it was a method. It was called double-entry bookkeeping. Sounds boring, right? But listen to this. Before this, kings and merchants ran their finances on guesswork. They didn't actually know how much money they had or where it was. They were flying blind. Fugger changed the game. With double-entry bookkeeping, he created the medieval version of Microsoft Excel. He knew exactly down to the last penny how much was in a mine in Hungary, a warehouse in Venice, or a bribe being paid in Spain. While emperors were drowning in debt because they couldn't count, Fugger had a god's eye view of the entire European economy. But knowing his own money wasn't enough. He needed to know yours. Fugger built the world's first private intelligence agency. We call it the Fugger News Service. He hired a massive network of couriers, spies, and informants across every major city in Europe. His mail service was faster and more reliable than the king's own messengers. Think about the advantage that gave him. If a storm sank a fleet of spice ships coming from India, Fugger knew about it. Days before the market crashed, he could short the market or buy up remaining stock while everyone else was still sleeping. If a king died in battle, Fugger knew who the successor would be before the body was even cold. He turned information into a weapon. And armed with this data, he was ready to make the biggest gamble in history. He wasn't just going to lend money anymore. He was going to start owning countries. With his network in place, Fugger began hunting for the perfect prey. He found him in Archduke Sigmund of Tyrol. Sigmund was a wealthy noble who was famously terrible with money. He threw parties where dwarves jumped out of pies to wrestle giants. He spent money he didn't have on luxuries he didn't need. Every banker in Europe had blacklisted him. They knew Sigmund would never pay them back in cash. But Jacob Fugger, he walked straight into the Archduke's castle with a massive bag of gold. Was he crazy? No. He was calculating. Fugger didn't want cash. He knew cash was just printed paper or stamped metal, so he put a special clause in the contract. Instead of repayment, Fugger demanded control over the Archduke's silver and copper mines until the debt was settled. In one signature, Fugger seized the production of the most valuable resources of the era. He essentially foreclosed on the earth itself. He now controlled the copper used to make cannons for war, and the silver used to mint coins for commerce. But if you think cornering the metal market was ruthless, wait until you hear how he profited from human suffering. In the early 16th century, a terrifying new plague hit Europe: syphilis. It was rotting people alive. Kings, priests, peasants, no one was safe. Doctors believed the only cure was a rare wood from South America called guaiacum. People called it holy wood. They were desperate for it. And guess who secured the exclusive monopoly to import this wood into Europe? Jacob Fugger. He used his connections with the Spanish court to control the supply chain. He built specialized hospitals for syphilis patients, but this wasn't charity. It was a business model. If you wanted the cure, you paid Fugger's price. He was profiting from war with his copper and profiting from disease with his wood. He had cornered life and death. And with this immense fortune, he was ready for his masterstroke, choosing the next emperor of the world. In 1519, the Holy Roman Emperor died. The throne was up for grabs. But in those days, you didn't just inherit the empire. You had to be elected. It came down to two candidates: King Francis, the first of France, and the young Charles, the fifth of Spain. Francis was rich. He arrived with mule trains loaded with gold to bribe the 7 electors who cast the votes. Charles was broke. But Charles had something better. He had Jacob Fugger. Fugger looked at the French king's gold and essentially said, "Hold my beer." He orchestrated the biggest political bribe in history. He transferred nearly 850,000 florins tons of gold to the electors. Fugger personally financed nearly 2/3 of the entire sum. The electors took the money, and Charles V became the most powerful man on earth. But here is the dirty secret most textbooks leave out. Fugger didn't actually have that much cash lying around. He had leveraged himself to the hilt. He was staring down a potential liquidity crisis. To sustain gambles this large, Fugger needed a constant, massive stream of cash flowing into his vaults from somewhere else. He needed a partner who could generate money from thin air, and he had one. His oldest and most reliable client, the Vatican. You see, before the election, Fugger had already built a machine to extract wealth from the common people. It involved a young noble named Albrecht of Brandenburg, who wanted to buy a high church office. Albrecht borrowed a fortune from Fugger to pay the Pope for the title. But when Albrecht couldn't pay Fugger back, the three of them, the banker, the bishop, and the Pope, agreed on a solution. They unleashed the sale of indulgences. It was marketed as saving souls. In reality, it was a debt collection scheme. Fugger's own employees traveled with the preachers, holding the keys to the money chests. Every coin a peasant paid to save their grandmother from hell was split, half to the Pope, half to Fugger. So while Fugger was busy buying emperors with one hand, he was collecting the life savings of the poor with the other. This precise flow of dirty money is what pushed Martin Luther to ignite the Reformation. Fugger didn't just shape the political map of Europe. His bank account accidentally redrew the religious map of the world. But the Reformation didn't stay a theological debate. It turned violent. In 1524, the German Peasants' War erupted. Inspired by Luther, hundreds of thousands of peasants rose up. They attacked castles. They burned monasteries. And guess who topped their hit list? Jacob Fugger. To the peasants, he was the symbol of ultimate greed, the man who stole their silver and sold them fake salvation. Fugger knew his life was in danger. But did he hide? Did he flee? No. He doubled down. He opened his vaults and financed the Swabian League, a mercenary army hired to crush the rebellion. Fugger's money paid for the weapons that slaughtered over 100,000 peasants. He literally paid for the massacre of his own countrymen to protect his assets. The blood of the peasants' war was on his hands. And perhaps, as he watched the smoke rise from the burning villages, the weight of his sins finally began to crush him. This brings us to the final, strange twist of his life. By the 1520s, Jacob Fugger had conquered the material world, but he had a problem no amount of gold could solve: his own mortality. You see, despite his ruthless business tactics, Fugger was a deeply religious Catholic, and deep down, he was terrified. For decades, he had practiced usury, lending money with interest. According to the medieval church, this was a mortal sin. He was the richest man on earth, yet convinced he was going straight to hell. So, true to his nature, Fugger decided to make a deal with God. In his hometown of Augsburg, he built a city within a city. It was called the Fuggerei. It was the world's first social housing complex, 52 houses designed specifically for the poor. But Fugger was a businessman, not a saint. He didn't give handouts. He demanded a transaction. To live there, you had to meet 3 conditions. First, you had to be Catholic. Second, you had to be poor but debt-free. And third, this is the kicker, you had to pray. Every single day, residents were required to pray 3 times the Lord's Prayer, the Hail Mary, and the Nicene Creed specifically for the soul of Jacob Fugger. He was essentially hiring the poor to be his spiritual lawyers, pleading his case to God for eternity. And here is the most mind-blowing part. The Fuggerei is still open. Today, it is still owned by the Fugger family. People still live there. And the rent? It hasn't changed in 500 years. The rent is 1 Rhenish guilder per year. In modern money, that is exactly 0.88 euros, less than $1 a year. But the contract still holds. The residents still pray for Jacob's soul every single day. Even from the grave, Jacob Fugger is still collecting interest, not in gold, but in prayers. As he neared the end of his life, his family begged him to retire. They said, "You have enough. Stop working." Fugger looked at them and delivered his final words. "I have a different mind. I want to gain while I can." He died in 1525, working until his very last breath, leaving behind a legacy that shaped the modern world. So, what is the true legacy of Jacob Fugger? Some call him a financial genius who modernized the economy. Others call him a ruthless monster who profited from death and corruption. But the truth is, he was the architect of the world we live in today. Before Fugger, business and politics were separate. After Fugger, they became one and the same. When you see billionaires lobbying politicians today, Jacob Fugger did it first. When you hear about nations drowning in national debt, Jacob Fugger invented that game. When you see banks that are too big to fail, Fugger was the original prototype. He proved that if you lend enough money to a king, you effectively become the king. He showed us that the pen, specifically the accountant's pen, is mightier than the sword. Jacob Fugger didn't just accumulate wealth, he weaponized it. So here is my question for you. If Jacob Fugger were alive today, do you think he would be admired like Warren Buffett or hated like a movie villain? And in the grand scheme of history, was his ambition worth the cost? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the history of money and power, please hit that subscribe button. I have many more stories of the tycoons who built our world coming up. Thanks for watching. And remember, always check the fine print.